I want to start this commentary by thanking a person who helped me know this game. It's a friend of mine who actually has a degree in archaeology, kind of like Leighton. So thank you, EA. That's his nickname. Anyway, get ready because we actually have an interesting intro to go on.
Vice, you dumbass! Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry. Maybe I'll rip your
Hi,
face
Laura
off
Bailey.
one by one, or maybe I'll put you in the goddamn furnace. How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord. Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord. Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is NieR. Where do I start? I mean,
Maybe start in the beginning.
yeah, that's probably the best way.
Yeah. I think I just came.
Oh God.
That TMI, Pedro. This is a game from. Well, let's start with technicalities. This is a game made in 2000. Well, released in 2010.
I came and I heard Laura Bailey was in this game.
By Team Cavia, by developer Team Cavia and publisher obviously Square-Enix. Team Cavia is best renowned for starting a series called Drakengard back in the PlayStation 2, which tried, as I'll talk about more later, but the gist of it for now is that it tried to focus on telling RPGs, fantasy stories, but in a different way, to showcase a more realistic approach in a sense that what would happen if all the classic tropes and cliches of fantasy RPGs actually apply like they're almost in real life. Similar to the Tales of franchise, but with a much more impact to them. The Team Cavia was not led, but one member of it was this person called Yoko Taro, which had this philosophy from the start. He is a man similar to Akira Ino in a sense that saw what the game industry has become to this day and wanted to do something to change it and showcase to people. But unlike Ino, he actually wants to do a more violent and shock valuing approach. If Ino wants instead to be more friendly and more reasonable, Taro is instead the opposite extreme. He doesn't pull any punches with it. And this was what many people consider his magnum opus, kind of like by the time. The problem is this game is not exempt from flaws at all, as we'll see pretty much just a bit.
From what I've heard about this game, it has brilliant music and story, but the gameplay leaves a lot to be desired.
From what I've heard, that's Yoko Taro's problem in general.
This is up until recently thanks to NieR Automata, but we'll get more about even later. One thing we may notice so far is that the graphics are not that great, for example. This was because Team Cavia up until recently, as I mentioned with Automata, had always small budgets. And when it comes to NieR, since it was 2010, it was those magical years where Square-Enix was pulling away from all of its teams in order to build up a certain trilogy, what we know. But for now, let's just start the game. I'll talk more about later. Yes, it also has DLC, but it's completely irrelevant, and I'll show just a brief of it in another part. I'll use easy difficulty because it just makes the game... the gameplay doesn't... even if you're playing hard, you don't really miss you don't really change anything. The enemies just get a bit more health bar. The first thing we do is to input our character's name, because this is the first of the many Zelda references that we'll see in this game. Because Taro is a sucker also for Zelda, so we'll see a lot of references.
Roll credits.
So, the loading screens, by the way, are not that invasive, but sometimes they can be a bit too long for your taste. In the loading screen, you also get this diary that will help you understand a bit more the plot. So we start this traditional fantasy RPG in modern-day Tokyo, and it's snowing.
Huh.
This is the first is visual telling with of a sign that it's recurring to this entire game and what Yoko Taro wants to tell you. nothing is as it seems. You have to actually, there's still something more than what appears to be in the surface. But what it is, well...
It's like the 1998 Avengers movie where they evacuate the whole city.
Well, there is an explanation for this, but I'll have to talk about it later in another part. The one thing you know also notice is that of the score. Up until this point, Team Kavi and Yoko Taro couldn't have a decent composer. The score were not. Yeah, the year is 2049, and it's summer. And appropriately, this piece is called Snow in Summer.
I bet it took him like 5 minutes to come up with that title.
But basically,
it's summer and it's snowing. Snow in summer.
This modern day Tokyo is in ruin, and we start our tension with our protagonist in the ruins of a mall.
Wow, did the Mario game release? Did one of the more recent Mario games up to that point go down that badly?
The economy crashed because Mario Odyssey flopped.
Yeah.
What a shame.
Hey, look, it's Dante.
This is our protagonist called NieR, obviously. In the American version, he's voiced by Jameson Price. Pretty much the entire cast of voice actor is known and and it's very good also.
Is that the book from the
Harry
Care Bears
Potter.
2?
Sorry, can you repeat?
The book from Care Bears 2.
Oh, I thought you were going to say what's the name. Anyway, I'll say more later. These are our enemies of the game. Hold on. These are called the Shades, and yes, in case you're wondering, Taro explicitly based these on the Heartless.
Yep.
Okay. It looked like the Enchantress brother from Suicide Squad.
Anyway, this is how the combat actually looks. It's a traditional beat-em-up slash hack and slash with nothing to it. I mean, it's not bad per se, but it's very bare bone. There's not too much variety. You get more variety later on with your magic, as we'll see later. But for the basic stuff, your attacks are very limited and you cannot do anything. Anyway, this is our protagonist's daughter, Yona.
I'll get up behind the voice actor so I can find out who voices who.
I told you already. The NieR is voiced by Jameson Price. Yona is voiced by Heifer Hogan. I don't know who she is.
If the monsters hear me, are they gonna come back for me?
I won't let them hurt you, Yona. I promise.
But they're gonna hurt me.
Now, as I mentioned, as you can pretty much tell, NieR is pretty much Yona's father, and this is one of the changes of the game that the game got in the West. Here's the thing: in Japan, the protagonist is actually a traditional young man with spiky hair, which is instead Yona's brother. Now, the problem is that Square-Enix, at the time, the CEO at the time, which was, as we remember, was a complete moron, said that Western audience wouldn't have liked that, and instead wanted to opt for a Conan the Barbarian figure, and as we'll see later, they got that to a T when it comes to the design. But because he thought that the Western audience would have liked it more. And instead of being the brother, it would have been the father. Now, here's what happened. In a strange result, at least for me and for a lot of people, including, for example, Yahtzee from Zero Punctuation, this change actually worked, but not for the reasons Square wanted. Papa NieR, as it's called, instead of Brother NieR, is a much more likable protagonist, as we'll see later on, but not because of the bulky macho-ness factor, but because he's actually a father figure that cares for his daughter and wants to protect her, which is extremely rare in RPGs, especially these days. which instead makes his attachment to his daughter and wanting to protect her, as we'll see later on, much more believable instead of a Japanese version, which, well, by Yoko Taro's tradition, as we will see in another game, makes it all very awkwardly and borderline incest subtext.
Hey, at least it's not as...
So in a way, the West version improved greater on things and actually made the protagonist much more likable in that way. Anyway, as you will see, Papa NieR didn't stand a chance against these shades, so in a last resort, he actually accepts the book. But what the book does, we'll see in a second.
Need a hand.
By the way, it was Yoshiwada that was it the name. I'm sorry, Matsuda-san, you're awesome.
Stay away from my daughter.
And there you go. Now you have actually access to the magic of the book. Now, what the book does, it's going to be explained later, but essentially it's blood magic. As you can see, enemies squirt blood like there's no tomorrow. And the blood gets absorbed by the book, which refills your magic meter, the blue bar, under your health. And these in turn allow you to use the magic attacks, which varies for now in the effect of the dark hand. Now you'll get more, and you can also level up, which level up both your stats and your HP. Now to talk a bit more about what I was saying before about the composing. Team Yoko Taro did not have a mainline composer up until this very point. The soundtrack of of Drakengard was not bad per se, but it wasn't anything special to begin with, which contribute to the game to the games of Team Cavia not being recognized that much up until recently. But for this one, Taro asked help to Keiichi Okabe, which was a composer who composed pretty much mostly for Tekken. And as we know, Tekken scores, while being fun to listen, they're not as memorable as other games. But I don't know who he was, if it was Okabe himself or Taro. Either one of them or both of them had a very specific vision in mind. Because the score of this game, and by extension later games that Taro made with Okabe in his hand, actually had something that games didn't try now. So they focused a lot of percussions and choirs, especially you can understand a bit better, especially you, Joe, I even know, I think you're BRB, but whatever.
Yes, I was BRB'd, but
okay,
now I'm back.
Sorry.
So what were you talking about?
Very much more like on choirs and percussions to create more atmospheric. And they rely a lot on the fact that they're using a fictional language for the lyrics of pretty much almost all of its music tracks, using to vocalize, using voice as an instrument of its own, instead of just telling lyrics. There are one or two tracks that actually have the lyrics that are understandable, but for the most part the made-up language is made specifically for this purpose. Now, this can be a bit controversial because one may say, oh, I want to still understand what the fuck this is saying. But for me personally, it just helps creating the atmosphere and to complement the game, because the theme, one of the main theme of the game is actually understanding in a setting that's not easy to understand. And as we will see later, both visually and with this musically, you cannot really know what's going on, and the music helps to this factor. You don't know what this language is saying, and you don't know what these songs are saying. Aside from one that the game itself tells you what it's saying with the fictional languages. But what it helped with this score is that the end result with the music choice, regardless of the lyrics, was actually really amazing, as you will hear through the course of the main game. To a point where that the music appeared multiple times in other media. We made a concert recently, and a couple of music also appeared in Fiat Rhythm, Final Fantasy Curtain Call, and Okabe became pretty much a staple of Taro's team. And they got him later to do also Dragon Guard 3, and more recently Nier Automata, and he also gets starred in the episode Gladio of Final Fantasy 15.
Cool.
Another, as you may have seen, for this beginning sequence, by the way, in case you're wondering, you have to interpret it your own way, in a sense, but consider it kind of like a dreamlike sequence. Because I will see by the end of it, or by the beginning of a previous part, it's not like it never happened, but you just have to remember it, but put it back in the back of your brain, and for a while forget about it, because the game will focus on it. Anyway, after cleaning out the shades, Papa NieR has to check on Yona to see if it's still okay, but surprise, boss!
Surprise, well.
Now, as you may notice, also enemies sport health bar, kind of like in Sonic Heroes or Shadow the Hedgehog.
The HUD is very minimal.
Sorry, can you repeat?
The HUD is very minimal.
The hub, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's the hub. That's because you don't really have a lot to do. You can still later on you can still put up your menus, and it's all the stuff you need. It's actually there. But for what you need, you just need the minimap, the enemies health bar, and you roll. And that's pretty much it. Automata instead changes things in a more RPG tradition by having instead, aside from the health bar returning, but you also inflict numbers when you inflict damage, and you can see how much damage you're doing. Here instead is just, yeah. Well, it's always a good thing. You can also see that the game is using an algorithm, but here is just a matter of seeing the red portion of the health bar going down. Now, when it comes to bosses, this one is actually really tame in comparison, because the bosses you will see later on in the game are actually a bit, dare I say, a bit crazier. Not Platinum Games level of craziness, because the limited gameplay actually limits what you can do. But in terms of design and what can we do, they're actually pretty creative. Another thing you may also notice, aside from the graphic that I mentioned earlier, is of the lightning engine. The lightning, I swear, the lightning engine in this game is very
don't you
terrible.
mean lighting engine?
Well, whatever it's pronounced.
Yeah, it's lighting. You said lightning. So.
Yeah, but seriously, every time you've said lighting engine, you've said it like it's a lightning engine.
Oh, I have to explain this. Okay, when a boss enemy or important enemy is down, clock appears. You have to deplete the runes before the clock runs out. Otherwise, the enemy will regain a bit of health, and you have to put it KO again. Don't worry about the runes stack, so you don't have to do that from the beginning. And later on, enemies are really easy to deplete anyway, so it's not a huge issue. It's just for the beginning. Anyways, I mentioned the lighting, engine is really weird. There are times in this game where the game literally blinds you. You almost not see what is going on. So that's sad. That's a very sad flaw that they couldn't fix.
Yeah,
and it's the first of many. And again, that's kind of my thing with. I'm kind of convinced that by the end of it, there's a good chance you may not end up liking this game. But it's okay, I still want you to see what it looks like anyway.
Yeah, well, I've got to be honest, the first boss of Automata trumps this boss, so that's to be expected.
Well, that's Platinum Games magic for you.
Yeah, pretty much.
I know it's to be expected because, you know, it's a sequel, but come on, the ending of that boss fight lets you punch the monster away with its own fist.
Anyway, let's check on you now.
Beautiful.
You were there, Shiroi.
Yeah, she was.
It has been a while since we did that demo.
Yona,
Yeah.
talk to me.
As you may notice, Yona is also sick, but what he's sick about, we'll see in a
Don't worry
second.
about me. I'm fine.
That's good. Oh, look. I found this while you were gone.
You found the script?
Hey, that's your
Actually, something to eat, because it's kind of like in that movie with Viggo Mortensen and The Road.
Dad, no. You need to eat something.
Oh.
All right. Give me the small half.
No. Come on, Dad. You're bigger than me. You have to eat to
Jesus.
Did you say we found out what she's sick from?
Yeah, just in a second. Well, we will see, but what it actually is that we will tell in just a second. There you go. Those small black lines.
She's dying of felt tip penitis.
What have you done?
Ah, Jameson Pierce playing a much concerned father.
Oh, I wanted to.
Familiar, eh, Pedro?
In case you're wondering, for example, some roles that you can remember, he played, for example, Reeve in The Legend of Cerberus, but and for example, the narrator in Eternal Sonata.
We need help.
Pedro?
I'm Yami, I'm just trying to pay
We
attention.
need help. Please, anyone, help! Help us!
You will get help, but for now, just forget about this scene. Because we're gonna jump a bit ahead, at least for at the beginning of the next part, because this was pretty much your tutorial prologue.
And alright, that was NieR. That was kind of a sad ending, but
Wow, that was a pretty underwhelming game.
Also, as you will notice, the frame rate is kept at 30 FPS, but sometimes dropped in a couple of cases. But in other times, in order to prevent that, hold on. There you go. That's the tower of Akihabara,
Big
I think.
Ben?
No, it's in the middle of Tokyo. And there you go, director Yoko Taro. But sometimes the frame rate, unfortunately, in order to prevent frame rate loss, has a small graphical downgrade. But we'll see. For now, see you for part 2.
alright, see you
See
everybody.
ya.